Ever wondered what it takes to etch your name into the annals of adventure? For some legendary explorer Duas, the secret ingredient might just have been flying solo. Romantically speaking, imagine charting unknown lands or soaring to new heights without having to text a significant other back home. These adventurers swapped traditional domestic life for the thrill of discovery, often with a kindred, equally unattached spirit by their side. We are talking about people who faced down unexplored wildernesses, hostile environments, and the very limits of human knowledge, sometimes years before anyone else. One pair meticulously documented over 60,000 plant specimens previously unknown to Europeans, while another unlocked the secrets of powered flight, forever changing our world. Another duo walked over 8,000 miles through the American West, and one unconventional explorer even became the first Western woman to meet the Dalai Lama in the forbidden city of Lhasa, all while being devotedly single or unencumbered by conventional relationship. Get ready to meet 5 such pairs who proved that sometimes the greatest adventures are unattached. Number 5. The Wright brothers who gave us wings and had no time for rings. Wilbur Wright, born on April 16, 1867, near Millville, Indiana, and his younger brother Orville Wright, born on August 19, 1871 in Dayton, Ohio, were pioneers who gave humanity the gift of powered flight. Neither brother ever married. They lived together, often with their sister Katharine, forming a tight-knit family unit that supported their ambitious dreams. Their path to the skies was not one of sudden inspiration, but of careful study, relentless experimentation, and a shared singular focus that their unattached lives helped to foster. Their early ventures showcased their mechanical aptitude and clean-liberté spirit. First, they ran a printing press, even designing and building their own presses. Then in 1892, as the bicycle craze swept the nation, they opened the Wright Cycle Company. This business was more than just a livelihood. It was a workshop where they honed their skills in woodworking and metalworking, skills that would prove invaluable in constructing their flying machines. Profits from the bicycle shop also provided the crucial funding for their aeronautical experiments, money that might otherwise have been directed towards supporting individual families. The tragic death of Otto Lilienthal, a German pioneer of glider flight, in August 1896, deeply impacted the Wrights and is often cited as a catalyst for their serious interest in aviation. They began to devour every piece of information they could find on flight. They studied the work of Lilienthal, Samuel Langley, and Octave Chanute, an engineer who became a mentor and correspondent. The brothers realized that previous experimenters had often focused on powerful engines, sometimes neglecting the crucial problem of control. They believed that a pilot needed to be able to balance and steer an aircraft, much like a cyclist balances a bicycle. Their methodical approach set them apart. Between 1900 and 1902, they built and tested a series of gliders at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. They chose this remote location for its steady winds and soft sandy dunes, ideal for cushioning less than perfect landings. During these glider tests, they discovered that the existing aerodynamic data from others was unreliable. So, with characteristic ingenuity, they built their own wind tunnel in their Dayton workshop in late 1901. It was a simple wooden box, 6 feet long, with a fan driven by a natural gas engine. In this tunnel, they meticulously tested over 200 different wing shapes and airfoil designs, gathering the precise data they needed to build an effective flying machine. This intense period of research and development, often involving long hours and shared intellectual labor, was something their bachelor lifestyles readily accommodated. Key innovation was their concept of wing warping. Observing how birds flexed their wings to turn and balance, they devised a system where the pilot could twist the wings of the aircraft slightly, changing their shape to control roll and maintain equilibrium. This, combined with a movable rudder for yaw control, gave them a 3-axis control system, a fundamental breakthrough in aircraft design. By 1903, they were ready to attempt powered flight. They designed and built their own lightweight gasoline engine, as no suitable commercial engine existed. Produced about 12 horsepower. They also designed and carved their own propellers, realizing they would function like rotating wings. After several frustrating delays, including broken propeller shafts and unfavorable weather, December 17, 1903, dawned cold and windy at Kill Devil Hills near Kitty Hawk. That morning, they made 4 powered flights. 10:35 anti-meridium, Orville piloted the Wright Flyer for the first attempt. It lasted 12 seconds and covered a distance of 120 feet. It was a modest flight, but it was the first time a heavier-than-air machine had taken off under its own power, flown in a controlled manner, and landed without damage. The brothers took turn. Wilbur's best flight that day covered 852 feet and lasted 59 seconds. Only 5 people witnessed this historic achievement. The world was largely unaware that humanity had entered the age of aviation. The brothers' dedication to their work was all-consuming. Wilbur famously remarked that he had no time for both a wife and an airplane. Orville, often described as shy and reserved, also remained a lifelong bachelor. Their sister, Katharine Wright, played a vital, though often overlooked, role. College graduate and teacher, she managed the household, handled correspondence, and later, when the brothers achieved fame, she traveled with them to Europe, acting as their social liaison and business assistant. She too remained unmarried until late in life, dedicating much of her energy to supporting her brother's endeavors. This shared family commitment, unburdened by spousal responsibilities for any of them during the crucial inventive years, created an environment where their inventive genius could flourish. They shared finances, living quarters, and an unwavering belief in their project. After their 1903 success, they returned to Dayton and continued to refine their aircraft at Huffman Prairie, a cow pasture 8 miles east of the city. By 1905, they had developed the Wright Flyer II, an aircraft capable of flying circles, figure eights, and staying airborne for over half an hour. They had created a practical airplane, yet convincing the world, and particularly the United States government, took time. Initial skepticism was rampant. It was not until 1908, when Wilbur demonstrated their flyer in France, and Orville made similar demonstration flights in Fort Myer, Virginia for the United States Army, that their achievements were widely recognized. These flights captivated the public and astounded aviation experts. Wilbur's graceful control of his machine in Europe made him an international celebrity. Orville's flights, though tragically marked by a crash on September 17, 1908, that severely injured him and killed his passenger, Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge, still proved the capabilities of their invention. Selfridge became the first fatality of an airplane crash. The brothers formed the Wright Company in 1909 to manufacture and market their airplanes. However, their later years were consumed by exhausting patent battles as they sought to protect their inventions from infringement. These legal struggles took a toll, particularly on Wilbur. He contracted typhoid fever and died on May 30, 1912, at the young age of 45. Orville, deeply affected by his brother's death, continued to work in aeronautics but eventually sold his interest in the Wright Company in 1915. He spent much of his later life serving on various aviation boards and committees, a revered elder statesman of flight. Orville Wright passed away on January 30, 1948, at the age of 76. The Wright brothers' story is one of perseverance, intellectual brilliance, and an extraordinary partnership. Their unmarried status was not merely incidental, it was interwoven with their capacity for intense, shared focus. They poured their collective energies, financial resources, and time into solving the problem of flight, a task that demanded complete devotion. Their home was their laboratory, and their family their closest collaborators, a unique setup that allowed them to explore the untamed skies and give the world wings. Number 4. Alexandra, David-Néel, and Aphur Yongden, who braved forbidden lands together. Louise Eugenie Alexandrine Marie David, later known as Alexandra David-Néel, was born on October 24, 1868, in Saint-Mandé, France. An explorer, spiritualist, Buddhist scholar, opera singer, and writer, she was a woman of fierce independence and an insatiable curiosity for the unknown, particularly the esoteric traditions of the East. While she did marry Philippe Néel de Saint-Sauveur in 1904 in Tunis, their relationship was unconventional. By 1911, they had mutually agreed to live largely separate lives, a pact that allowed Alexandra the freedom to embark on her extensive travels and studies, effectively living as a single, unencumbered adventurer for the most significant periods of her exploratory life. Philippe provided financial support for many years, understanding her need for an untethered existence. Her most famous companion in adventure was Aphur Yongden, born in Sikkim in 1899. Alexandra met him in 1914, when he was just 15 years old and she was 46, during her studies at a monastery in Sikkim. Yongden, a young monk, quickly became her devoted assistant, travel companion, and in 1929, her legally adopted son. Their bond was profound, a partnership built on shared hardship, mutual respect, and a common goal of penetrating the most remote and spiritually significant regions of Asia. Their most legendary feat was their clandestine journey to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, a city then strictly forbidden to foreigners. This arduous trek began in the autumn of 1921, with Alexandra disguised as an impoverished Tibetan pilgrim woman and Yongden as her son, a young lama. For nearly 3 years, they traversed treacherous mountain passes, battled extreme cold and blizzards, faced starvation, and evaded bandits and suspicious officials. Alexandra was 55 years old when they began this particular grueling segment of their travels, a testament to her incredible resilience and determination. To maintain their disguise, they carried minimal possessions: a few cooking pots, spare clothes, and religious texts. Alexandra darkened her skin with soot and yak butter, wore coarse woolen robes, and even learned to expertly handle a beggar's bowl. They begged for food, slept in rudimentary shelters or out in the open, and constantly navigated the dangers of being discovered. Their fluency in Tibetan dialects and deep understanding of local customs were crucial to their survival. Alexandra's years of studying Buddhism and living in monastic communities had prepared her well for the intellectual and spiritual aspects of their disguise, while Yongden's native understanding and youthful energy were indispensable. They finally reached Lhasa in early 1924, after an 8-month final push through snow-covered landscapes. Alexandra David-Néel thus became one of the first, if not the very first European woman to enter the sacred Forbidden City. They stayed in Lhasa for 2 months, observing its life and religious practices before their identities were eventually discovered, forcing them to leave. The journey itself covered hundreds of miles on foot, across some of the most inhospitable terrain on Earth, with altitudes often exceeding 15,000 feet. This journey to Lhasa was but one episode in decades of exploration. Alexandra and Yongden spent nearly 14 years, from 1911 to 1925, continuously traveling and studying throughout India, Nepal, Sikkim, China, and Tibet. She immersed herself in Buddhist philosophy and practice, studying with lamas and hermits, and even undertaking solitary retreats in remote Himalayan caves. One such retreat lasted for 2 years, during which she practiced advanced tantric meditation techniques. Her deep knowledge and personal experience of Tibetan Buddhism lent an unparalleled authenticity to her writings. The unique nature of Alexandra's relationship with David-Néel, characterized by separation and his continued support, provided her with a degree of freedom rarely available to women of her era. Her subsequent platonic but deeply loyal partnership with Yongden created a self-sufficient exploration unit. Yongden's monastic background meant he too was unencumbered by typical family ties, and his devotion to Alexandra was absolute. Together they formed a formidable team, her intellectual drive and indomitable will complemented by his practical skills, linguistic abilities, and companionship. They were not bound by romantic expectations, but by a shared spiritual quest and a love for adventure. Alexandra David-Néel wrote over 30 books, detailing her travels, Eastern philosophies, and Buddhist teachings. Works like My Journey to Lhasa, published in 1927, became international bestsellers, captivating readers with tales of her daring exploits and insights into a world then largely unknown in the West. Her writings were not mere travelogues. They were rich with ethnographic detail, philosophical reflections, and personal accounts of spiritual practices. After their return to France in 1925, Alexandra and Yongden settled in Digne-les-Bains in southeastern France, in a house she named Samten-Zong, meaning Fortress of Meditation. Yongden remained with her, assisting with her writing and research. They even made another journey to China and Tibet from 1937 to 1946, enduring the perils of the Second Sino-Japanese War. Aphur Yongden passed away on October 7, 1955, in Digne. His death was a profound loss for Alexandra. She continued to write and study, a formidable intellectual figure even in her old age. Alexandra David-Néel lived an extraordinarily long and adventurous life, passing away on September 8, 1969, just weeks before her 101st birthday. Her life story is a powerful example of how an unconventional approach to personal relationships, coupled with an unyielding spirit, can lead to grounding achievements. Her functional singleness, combined with her unique partnership with Yongden, allowed her to pursue her passions with a singular intensity, breaking barriers of geography, culture, and gender. Number 3. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, the duo who charted the American West. Meriwether Lewis, born on August 18, 1774 in Albemarle County, Virginia, and William Clark, born a few years earlier on August 1, 1770, in Caroline County, Virginia, formed one of history's most famous exploratory partnerships. Lewis, a complex and intellectually curious man, never married. Clark, pragmatic and an adept outdoorsman, married Julia Hancock in January 1808, 2 years after the triumphant return of their expedition, meaning he too was unattached during their epic journey. Their combined venture, the Corps of Discovery Expedition, undertaken between 1804 and 1806, was a monumental undertaking that expanded America's understanding of its newly acquired Western territories. The expedition was commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson shortly after the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, which nearly doubled the size of the United States. Jefferson, a man of wide-ranging scientific interests, envisioned more than just a mapping exercise. Tasked Lewis, his personal secretary, with finding a practical water route to the Pacific Ocean for commerce, but also with meticulously documenting the geography, flora, fauna, and the Native American tribes they would encounter. Lewis, recognizing the scale of the undertaking, requested that William Clark, an old Army friend, serve as his co-commander, though technically Clark only held the rank of lieutenant, while Lewis was a captain. Lewis always treated Clark as an equal in command, and they shared decision-making throughout the journey. Corps of Discovery, a party of around 45 men at its outset, departed from Camp Dubois near present-day Hartford, Illinois, on May 14, 1804. They traveled up the Missouri River in a large keelboat and 2 smaller pirogues. The sheer physical effort was immense. The men rowed, poled, and sometimes cordelled the heavy boats against the powerful current of the Missouri, covering an average of 10 to 20 miles a day. Their unattached status was almost a prerequisite for such an endeavor. The journey would demand complete commitment, resilience to extreme isolation from settled society, and a willingness to be absent from home for an unknown number of years. Lewis served as the expedition's chief scientist, meticulously collecting plant and animal specimens, many of which were previously unknown to American scientists. He documented 178 plants and 122 species and subspecies of animals. His journals are filled with detailed observations on geology, climate, and natural phenomena. Clark, an excellent cartographer, was responsible for mapping their route and the surrounding territory. His maps were remarkably accurate for their time and provided the first detailed picture of the American West. He was also the primary diplomat in their dealings with Native American tribes. During the first winter, from 1804 to 1805, the expedition established Fort Mandan near the villages of the Mandan and Hidatsa tribes in present-day North Dakota. It was here they recruited 2 crucial members, Toussaint Charbonneau, a French-Canadian fur trader, and his young Shoshone wife, Sacagawea. Sacagawea, who had been captured from her people years earlier, proved invaluable. She served as an interpreter, helped gather edible plants, and her mere presence with a baby son, Jean-Baptiste, born during that winter, signaled to other tribes that the expedition came in peace, as war parties did not travel with women and children. In the spring of 1805, they sent the keelboat back downriver with a shipment of specimens and reports for President Jefferson, while the main party continued westward into uncharted territory. They faced incredible challenges, extreme weather conditions ranging from scorching heat to bitter cold, treacherous terrain including the formidable Rocky Mountains, food shortages that led to near starvation, rampant illnesses and injuries, and encounters with potentially dangerous wildlife like grizzly bears, which the men found to be astonishingly powerful and difficult to kill. They recorded encountering nearly 50 different Native American tribes, engaging in trade and councils, sometimes forming alliances, other times navigating tense situations. Crossing of the Rocky Mountains in the late summer and autumn of 1805 was perhaps their most arduous trial. Guided by Sacagawea and her people, the Shoshone, they struggled through deep snow and freezing temperatures, their food supplies dwindling. They were forced to eat their horses to survive. Finally, exhausted and emaciated, they reached the Clearwater River, a tributary of the Columbia, and with the help of the Nez Perce tribe, built dugout canoes to continue their journey westward. They paddled down the Clearwater, Snake, and Columbia rivers, eventually reaching the Pacific Ocean in November 1805. Clark famously wrote in his journal, "Ocean, in view, oh the joy." They established Fort Clatsop, near present-day Astoria, Oregon, for their second winter. The return journey began on March 23, 1806. To explore more territory, Lewis and Clark split their party for a time on the eastern side of the Rockies. Lewis led a group that explored the Marias River, while Clark led another to explore the Yellowstone River. During his side trip, Lewis and his men had a skirmish with a group of Blackfeet warriors, the only violent encounter with Native Americans during the entire expedition that resulted in fatalities for the Native Americans. Shortly after, Lewis was accidentally shot in the thigh by one of his own men during a hunting trip, an injury that laid him up for several weeks. The parties reunited on the Missouri River and arrived back in St. Louis on September 23, 1806, to a hero's welcome. They had been gone for over 2 years and had traveled an estimated 8,000 miles. The success of the Lewis and Clark expedition was a testament to their leadership, the resilience of their men, and the critical assistance of Native Americans like Sacagawea. Their single status during this period undoubtedly allowed them the singular focus and freedom from domestic concerns, essential for such a prolonged and perilous undertaking. Lewis, known for his bouts of melancholy, poured his intellectual energy into the scientific aspects of the mission. Clark's steady temperament and practical skills provided balance. Their partnership was one of deep mutual trust and complementary abilities. After the expedition, Lewis was appointed governor of the Upper Louisiana Territory, but struggled with administrative duties, debt, and possibly depression. His life ended tragically on October 11, 1809, at an inn on the Natchez Trace in Tennessee from gunshot wounds. It is still debated whether his death at age 35 was suicide or murder. William Clark, on the other hand, lived a long and prominent life. He married, had a family, and served as governor of the Missouri Territory, and later as superintendent of Indian Affairs. He died on September 1st, 1838, at the age of 68. The journals kept by Lewis, Clark, and other members of the Corps provide an invaluable record of the American West before widespread European settlement, a monumental achievement by a duo unencumbered by marital ties during their great adventure. Number 2. Richard Burton and John Hanning Speke, the rivals who searched for the Nile's source. Sir Richard Francis Burton, born on March 19, 1821, in Torquay, Devon, was one of the 19th century's most fascinating and controversial figures, an explorer, linguist, soldier diplomat, writer, and translator. John Hanning Speke, born on May 4, 1827, in Bideford, Devon, was a more conventional army officer, but equally driven by a thirst for discovery. Burton did marry Isabel Arundel in January 1861, but this was after his most famous and contentious expeditions with Speke. During their shared adventures, Burton operated with the fierce independence and unencumbered spirit that characterized much of his early, famously single life. Speke, in contrast, never married, dedicating his life to exploration and his military career. Their first expedition together in 1854–1855 was to Somaliland under the auspices of the East India Company. Burton, already renowned for his daring infiltration of Mecca, disguised as an Afghan pilgrim in 1853, aimed to explore the interior and assess its commercial potential. The expedition ended in disaster. In April 1855, their camp at Berbera was attacked by a large group of Somali warriors. Burton was grievously wounded when a javelin pierced both his cheeks, leaving him with distinctive scars. Speke suffered even more severely, sustaining 11 spear wounds and being captured briefly before managing to escape. This traumatic experience forged a bond, but also perhaps sowed seeds of future discord. Despite this harrowing start to their partnership, the Royal Geographical Society chose them to lead an expedition to East Africa in 1856, with the primary goal of finding the Great Lakes rumored to exist in the interior, which were believed to be the source of the White Nile. They set off from Zanzibar in June 1857, leading a caravan of porters and local guides into a region largely unknown to Europeans. The journey was plagued by immense hardships. Both men suffered terribly from tropical diseases, malaria, fevers, and infections. Burton was often so ill he had to be carried in a hammock, at times partially paralyzed or unable to walk. Speke endured periods of temporary blindness caused by ophthalmia and suffered from excruciating pain due to an insect crawling into his ear, which he tried to remove with a knife, causing deafness on that side. Their unattached status was crucial for undertaking such a perilous and prolonged venture. The immense physical suffering, the constant danger from hostile environments or potentially unwelcoming local populations, and the sheer isolation would have been difficult to reconcile with family responsibilities. They were pushing themselves to the absolute limits of human endurance, driven by ambition and the lure of discovery. In February 1858, after months of grueling travel, they became the first Europeans to reach Lake Tanganyika, which they initially believed might be the sought-after source of the Nile. However, observations and local reports suggested rivers flowed into it, not out of it in a northerly direction. By this time, Burton was severely debilitated by illness. While Burton recuperated at Tabora, Speke, having recovered some of his strength, embarked on a side trip northward in July 1858, acting on local accounts of another large lake. On August 3, 1858, Speke sighted an enormous expanse of water, which he named Lake Victoria, in honor of the Queen. He was immediately convinced that this vast lake was the true source of the Nile. He did not have the resources or time to fully circumnavigate it or find its outlet on this trip, but his conviction was strong. This discovery became the genesis of a bitter and public feud. Speke hurried back to England in May 1859, arriving before Burton, who was still weak from illness and traveling more slowly. Breaching what Burton considered an agreement to present their findings jointly to the Royal Geographical Society, Speke announced his discovery of Lake Victoria as the Nile's source, claiming the glory for himself. When Burton finally returned to England, he was furious. He vehemently disputed Speke's claim, arguing that Speke had insufficient evidence and that Lake Tanganyika or other water bodies might also contribute to the Nile. The scientific community and the public were divided. Speke was commissioned by the Royal Geographical Society to lead a follow-up expedition from 1860 to 1863, accompanied by Captain James Augustus Grant, another unmarried Army officer. This expedition aimed to confirm Lake Victoria as the source and trace the Nile's course. They reached Lake Victoria, and on July 28, 1862, Speke located the Nile's exit from the lake at a spot he named Ripon Falls. Though they did not follow the river continuously back to Egypt, they gathered substantial evidence supporting Speke's theory. The animosity between Burton and Speke intensified, fueled by rival publications and public lectures. Burton, a brilliant scholar and linguist fluent in reportedly 29 languages, used his formidable intellect and acerbic wit to attack Speke's findings. Speke, less of a public intellectual but steadfast in his claims, defended his discoveries. The Royal Geographical Society arranged a public debate between the two men at the meeting of the British Association for the Advancement of Science in Bath, scheduled for September 16, 1864. Tragically, the debate never happened. On the afternoon of September 15th, the day before the scheduled confrontation, John Hanning Speke died from a self-inflicted shotgun wound while hunting on a relative's estate near Bath. He was 37 years old. The inquest ruled his death an accident, but speculation about suicide has persisted, given the timing and the intense pressure he was under. Burton went on to have a long and varied career as a diplomat, writer, and translator, famously producing unexpurgated English versions of the Arabian Nights and the Kama Sutra. He always maintained his skepticism about Speke's sole claim to the Nile's source, though history largely vindicated Speke's discovery of Lake Victoria as a primary reservoir for the White Nile. Their partnership, born of shared ambition and immense bravery, shows how the freedom of being single allowed them to undertake extraordinarily risky endeavors. Their rivalry, however, highlights the intense pressures and personal costs often associated with the quest for fame and discovery in the world of exploration. Both men, in their own ways, epitomized the adventurous, unattached spirit that was willing to sacrifice personal comfort and safety for the pursuit of the unknown. Number 1. Alexander von Humboldt and Aimé Bonpland, the scientific nomads who redefined exploration. Baron Alexander von Humboldt, born on September 14, 1769, in Berlin, Prussia, was a polymath whose intellectual curiosity knew no bounds. A geographer, naturalist, explorer, and influential proponent of romantic philosophy and science, Humboldt never married. He dedicated his entire existence to the pursuit of knowledge and scientific discovery, his personal life famously devoid of conventional romantic partnership or family ties, allowing him an unparalleled freedom to roam the globe. His companion on his most formative and legendary journey was Aimé Pland. Born Aimé Jacques Alexandre Goujoux on August 22, 1773, in La Rochelle, France, Bonpland, a skilled botanist and physician, was also unattached during their epic Latin American expedition, though he did marry and have a family much later in life after settling in South America. Their monumental scientific expedition to the Americas, which lasted from 1799 to 1804, was self-funded by Humboldt, who had inherited a considerable fortune. This financial independence, combined with his single status, gave him the autonomy to design and execute a research program of unprecedented scope. Bonpland, with his medical and botanical expertise, was the perfect scientific partner for Humboldt's ambitious vision. They planned to investigate the interconnectedness of nature, to study how all forces, geological, meteorological, biological, interacted. They set sail from La Coruna, Spain, in June 1799, initially landing in Cumana, Venezuela. For 5 years, they traversed vast and diverse territories, covering over 6,000 miles, through what is now Venezuela, Cuba, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Mexico. Their journey was not merely about collecting specimens. It was about understanding the underlying unity of the natural world. Humboldt carried an array of the finest scientific instruments available, measuring everything from temperature and atmospheric pressure to magnetism and the blueness of the sky. In Venezuela, they explored the Orinoco River basin, venturing deep into dense rainforests, navigating treacherous rapids, and documenting indigenous cultures. They investigated the Cassiquiare Canal, a unique natural waterway connecting the Orinoco and Amazon river systems, confirming its existence. They collected thousands of plant specimens, many previously unknown to European science, with Bonpland taking the lead in botanical collection and description. They also studied electric eels in the Llanos with Humboldt, famously enduring powerful shocks during their experiments. One of their most celebrated achievements was the ascent of Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador in June 1802. At that time, Chimborazo, with an elevation of 20,548 feet, 6,263 meters, was believed to be the highest mountain in the world. Though they did not reach the absolute summit due to an impassable crevasse, Humboldt, Bonpland, and their local guide Carlos Montufar reached an altitude of approximately 19,286 feet, 5,878 meters. This was a world altitude record for humans at the time, achieved without modern mountaineering equipment, while suffering from altitude sickness, extreme cold, and difficult breathing in the thin air. Humboldt used the climb to study the effects of altitude on vegetation, observing how plant life changed in distinct zones as they ascended. A concept he later developed into his groundbreaking work on plant geography and isothermal lines connecting points of equal temperature. Throughout their travels, Humboldt meticulously recorded data. He studied the nutrient-rich bird droppings known as guano off the coast of Peru, recognizing its value as a fertilizer and helping to popularize its use in Europe. He investigated the ocean current flowing northward along the western coast of South America, now known as the Humboldt Current or Peru Current, and described its cooling effect on the climate. He was among the first to propose that the continents bordering the Atlantic Ocean, particularly South America and Africa, might have once been joined, a precursor to the theory of continental drift. Bonpland's role as the expedition's chief botanist was crucial. Together they collected, pressed, and described an astonishing 60,000 plant specimens, of which Around 3,500 were new to science. Bonpland's diligence and expertise in the field were indispensable to this massive undertaking. Their partnership was remarkably harmonious and productive, a testament to their shared dedication and mutual respect. Humboldt was the grand synthesizer, the observer of large-scale patterns, while Bonpland provided the detailed botanical groundwork. Their unattached personal lives were integral to the success and nature of this expedition. The journey demanded total immersion, often in dangerous and remote environments, for an extended period. Freedom from family obligations allowed them to dedicate themselves entirely to the rigors of fieldwork and the intellectual demands of their research. Humboldt, in particular, seemed to view a conventional domestic life as incompatible with his all-consuming passion for scientific exploration. He poured his personal fortune and his entire being into his work, living a life of scientific nomadism. After leaving South America, they spent time in Mexico, conducting further research before sailing to the United States in 1804, where Humboldt met with President Thomas Jefferson. They returned to Europe in August 1804, laden with an unprecedented trove of data, specimens, and observations. Humboldt spent the next 2 decades in Paris, processing and publishing their findings in a monumental, multi-volume work, Voyage to the Equinoctial Regions of the New Continent. This work, along with his later masterpiece Cosmos, cemented his reputation as one of the most influential scientists and thinkers of the 19th century. He profoundly shaped the way we understand the natural world, emphasizing interconnectedness and a holistic view of nature. Aimé Bonpland, after collaborating with Humboldt on the initial publications, eventually returned to South America in 1816. He became involved in agriculture and teaching in Argentina, and later, during a scientific expedition in Paraguay, was arrested and detained for nearly a decade by the dictator José Gaspar Rodriguez de Francia from 1821 to 1831. After his release, he settled in Argentina and later in southern Brazil, continuing his botanical work and corresponding with scientists in Europe until his death on May 11, 1858. Alexander von Humboldt lived until May 6, 1859, dying in Berlin at the age of 89. He remained a towering figure in science, his work inspiring generations of explorers and naturalists, including Charles Darwin. The Humboldt-Bonpland expedition stands as a landmark in the history of scientific exploration, a venture made possible by the unique combination of Humboldt's vision and resources, Bonpland's expertise, and the profound freedom their single unencumbered lives afforded them to pursue knowledge to the ends of the earth.